The battle had ended only hours ago, but the ruins still carried the smell of fire and smoke. Broken walls and shattered metal were scattered across the wide plain where humans and aliens had clashed. The night air was heavy, silent, and filled with the weight of loss. In the middle of that silence lay an alien woman named Liron. She was young by her people's count, though her sharp features and silver-tinted skin gave her a regal look. Her breathing was shallow, her body broken by the blast that had struck her side. She was alive, but only barely. Around her stood the healers of her kind. They wore long robes with glowing patterns that marked them as respected caretakers of life. They looked at her with calm, almost cold expressions. One of them placed his hand on her chest, feeling the weak beat of her heart. He shook his head slowly. Another whispered that her spirit was fading and nothing could be done. To them, her condition was hopeless. They believed it was against nature to force life when it had chosen to end. The healers stepped back and spoke words of farewell in their language. Then, one by one, they left her behind, their footsteps fading into the night. Liron could barely lift her head. Through half-closed eyes, she watched the figures of her healers vanish into the shadows. She wanted to cry out, to beg them not to leave her, but her voice would not rise. Pain locked her chest, and weakness held her still. For the first time, she felt fear. Her people had taught her that when death came, it should be met with peace. But her heart did not agree. She wanted to live. She wanted one more sunrise. Yet no one listened. No one stayed. The ruined chamber where they abandoned her was cold and broken. Pieces of stone and steel hung above her like teeth ready to fall. Wind blew dust through the cracks, covering her wounds in a thin layer of ash. She tried to move her arm, but her strength failed. Her mind drifted between waking and sleep, between the memory of fire and the empty silence of the present. It seemed certain that her life would end there, alone, with only ruins as her witness. Far away, a human patrol was moving across the battlefield. Their leader, a soldier named Daniel, walked at the front. He was tall, with rough features shaped by years of war. His armor was scratched and worn, but his eyes stayed sharp. Daniel had seen many battles, too many fallen friends, and too many promises broken. Yet something inside him always refused to accept death without a fight. That was what kept him moving long after others gave up. His squad was searching for hidden traps and possible survivors when Daniel noticed a faint sound. It was not the echo of falling stone or the howl of wind, but something softer, a breath, a weak cry, almost lost in the noise of the night. He raised his hand, signaling the others to stop. The squad looked at him in confusion, but he moved toward the sound with careful steps. Following the faint noise, Daniel entered the ruined chamber. His eyes adjusted to the shadows, and then he saw her. Liron lay on the ground, pale and broken. For a moment Daniel thought she was already gone, but then he saw her chest rise slowly, painfully. She was alive. He looked around the chamber, noticing the strange marks of alien healers on the floor. They had been here, but they had left her. His jaw tightened. To him, it felt like betrayal. Even if she was the enemy, leaving someone to die without trying everything possible went against everything he believed. One of his squad members stepped into the chamber behind him. "It's one of them," the soldier said in a low voice. "She's done for. Let's move on." Daniel did not answer. He knelt beside the alien woman and placed his fingers gently against her neck. A faint pulse trembled under his touch. She was holding on, even if only by a thread. He looked at her face and saw her eyes flicker open for the briefest moment. She looked at him with fear and confusion, but also with a silent plea. She wanted to live. Daniel's mind raced. He knew his orders. Humans and aliens were not supposed to interfere with each other's. Wounded in such a way, each side trusted their own healers. But here, the healers had abandoned her. They had chosen death for her. He could not accept that. He felt anger rise in his chest, not toward her, but toward the coldness of those who had left her behind. "We can't leave her," Daniel said firmly. His squad looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "She's the enemy," one argued. Another added, Even if you carry her back, our medics won't touch her. We don't know how to treat their kind. Daniel ignored them, enemy or not. She's alive. As long as she's alive, we have a duty. Without waiting for more debate, he slid his arms under her and lifted her carefully. She was light, weaker than he expected, and her breath shivered against his chest. The squad groaned in protest, but they followed him out of the chamber. Daniel carried her through the night, step by steady step, refusing to let her go. He felt her heartbeat against his armor, weak but present. With every beat, his resolve grew stronger. If her own people had given up on her, then he would not. Humans had a different way. They fought against impossible odds. They searched for hope even when none could be seen. Daniel believed that as long as she breathed, there was a chance. Back at the human outpost, the sight of Daniel carrying an alien woman caused surprise and anger. Officers demanded to know why he brought her. Medics shook their heads, saying they could not treat someone whose body worked so differently. They told him to leave her outside the gates, but Daniel did not put her down. He placed her gently in a corner of the medical tent and stood over her like a shield. She is not dead, he said, and until she is, I will not let her be abandoned. In the shadows of the tent, Loran's eyes opened once more. She saw the strange human standing over her, refusing to walk away. She did not understand his language fully, but she understood the fire in his eyes. For the first time since her healers left, she felt a spark inside her chest, a fragile hope. She did not know if she would survive, but she knew she was not alone anymore, and that small truth gave her strength to keep breathing. The human outpost was small and crowded. The tents were lined up in rows, the air filled with the smell of smoke, oil, and medicine. Soldiers moved quickly, repairing weapons, cleaning armor, or tending to their own wounds. The war between humans and Loran's people had been long, and both sides were tired. Yet when Daniel walked through the camp carrying the injured alien woman, everything stopped. Soldiers stared. Some whispered. Others looked at him with anger. Daniel ignored them. He pushed forward until he reached the medical tent and sighed, "Human." Medics were busy treating soldiers from the last battle. They looked up in shock when they saw him walking with Liron. One of them, a middle-aged medic with sharp eyes, shook his head. "What are you doing, Daniel?" "That's one of them. You can't bring her here. She's hurt," Daniel said firmly. "She was left to die. I won't let that happen." The medic raised his hands helplessly. "We don't know their biology. We don't know how their bodies work. If we try something wrong, it could kill her faster. And the command won't approve. She's the enemy." Daniel laid Liron gently on a cot in the corner. "Enemy or not, she's alive. She's breathing. That means she deserves a chance." The medic muttered under his breath and turned away. Orders were orders, and no one wanted to waste supplies on someone who might not survive. But Daniel stayed by her side. He took a wet cloth and wiped the dust and ash from her face. Her skin was cool to the touch, almost metallic in its pale silver shine. Her eyes opened faintly, and she looked at him. Her lips moved, but no words came out. "You're safe now," Daniel said softly, though he knew she might not understand. Still, he hoped his tone would carry meaning. "I won't let you be left behind again." The night passed slowly. Daniel remained awake, watching her breathing rise and fall. Several times it grew shallow, and fear gripped him. But she held on. He gave her sips of water, careful not to let her choke. He wrapped her wounds with clean bandages, even though he had no idea if it would work on her kind. He remembered his survival training, how simple methods could keep someone alive until real treatment was found. He held onto that memory and used it now, improvising where science and technology failed. By morning, whispers had spread through the camp. Soldiers argued outside the tent. Some said Daniel was wasting time. Others said it was dangerous to keep an alien inside. A few, though, were curious. They peeked in, saw Loran's weak body slowly breathing, and wondered if maybe Daniel's stubbornness was more than foolishness. Loran's mind drifted between darkness and light. She heard voices. Though they were muffled, most were harsh, full of doubt. But one voice always returned, steady and firm. It did not give up. It spoke to her as if her life was worth saving. That voice gave her strength when the pain became too heavy. In moments of clarity, she remembered how her healers had left her. Her people believed that when death's shadow touched someone, the fight was already lost. But this human refused that idea. He fought for her even though he had no reason to die at one point. Daniel's commanding officer entered the tent. He was a strict man, his uniform spotless, his expression hard. He looked at Daniel, then at Liron. "What is this?" he demanded. Daniel stood. "She was abandoned. I couldn't leave her there. She's still alive." The officer's jaw tightened. "You disobeyed orders by bringing her here. This camp is for our wounded, not theirs. You're putting resources at risk." "I didn't take any supplies," Daniel replied calmly. "All I've done is use cloth, water, and time. Nothing more." The officer stepped closer. "And what happens when she dies? What happens when the aliens accuse us of keeping one of theirs prisoner? You'll bring trouble on all of us." Daniel met his gaze without flinching. "Then let them accuse. But she's not dead yet, and until she is, I'll do everything I can." The officer stared at him for a long moment. Finally, he gave a short nod. "Do what you want, but when this goes wrong, it will be on you." He turned and left, leaving the air heavy with tension. Daniel sat back down, his eyes on Liron. He saw the faint rise of her chest, the weak flicker of her eyes. He spoke softly, almost like a promise. "You hear that? They want to give up on you. But I won't. As long as you're breathing, I'll keep trying." The days that followed were a battle of patience. Daniel improvised small ways to keep her stable. He built a crude breathing mask using parts from broken equipment, helping her draw in air when her lungs failed. He warmed her with heated cloth when her skin turned cold. He gave her water through a tube when she could not swallow. They were simple ideas, not advanced, but they kept her alive every day. Soldiers walked past the tent and shook their heads, but every day. Liran's breathing grew a little stronger. Her color returned faintly. She still hovered between life and death. But the balance began to shift. Daniel noticed the change, and though he did not show it, relief filled his chest. His idea was working. Liron finally found her voice one evening. Her words were weak, broken, but clear enough. She looked at Daniel and whispered, "Why, Daniel? Lean closer. Why what? Why save me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Others left. Daniel thought for a moment. He could have spoken about orders, or duty, or even strategy. But none of that was the truth. Instead, he answered simply, "Because there's still a chance." She stared at him with wide, tired eyes. No one from her world had ever said such words. To them, death was final once it began its approach. But this human believed in fighting until the very last breath. It was strange. It was foolish. Yet it was also beautiful. Daniel sat back and watched her drift into sleep again. For the first time, her breathing sounded less like a struggle and more like rest. He smiled faintly. She was not safe yet, not even close, but she had crossed a line. She was no longer only a body waiting for death. She was a fragile spark of life. And he would not let it go out. The camp around them still doubted, still argued, still whispered. But Daniel no longer cared. He had made his choice, and as long as he breathed, so would she. The camp was uneasy. Every passing day that Liron lived brought more whispers among the soldiers. Some called Daniel stubborn. Others called him foolish. A few wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was proving something the rest had forgotten. Yet, the tension grew heavier. The alien woman was alive, and her survival was no longer a secret. By the fourth day, the alien leaders sent a message. Their emissary, a tall figure with markings of authority on his robe, arrived at the human outpost. His name was Arvin, a respected elder among Liran's people. His face showed no emotion, but his words carried weight. "You have taken one of ours," Arvin said coldly. Standing before the human officers, she was left to return to the flow of life. It was her time. Your soldier interfered. This is against our ways. Daniel stood at the back of the gathering, listening as the officers shifted uncomfortably. One of them spoke first. She was not dead. Our man found her alive. He only acted out of instinct to help. Arvin's eyes narrowed. Your instinct defies the law of nature. When the body fails, the spirit must be released. Forcing her to remain is cruelty. Return her to us at once, and we will see that her passing is given honor. The words struck Daniel like a blade. He stepped forward before his officers could stop him. Honor? You left her alone in the dirt to die. That is not honor. That is giving up. Arvin turned his gaze to Daniel. Human soldier, you do not understand. Death is not your enemy. It is part of the path. To fight against it is to cause suffering. Daniel's voice was steady, but his eyes burned with fire. No, death may come, but until it does, we fight. We search for every way to survive. That is our way, to walk away from someone still breathing. That is what brings suffering. The human officers tried to calm the argument, but the tension filled the air. The emissary demanded again that Liron be returned. Daniel refused. He knew his words would cause trouble, maybe even punishment, but he would not betray the choice he had made. Later that evening, Daniel sat by Loran's side. She had heard some of the voices from outside the tent, though most of it blurred together in her weak state. When Daniel brought her a small cup of water, she looked at him with tired eyes. They want me gone, she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, your people believe it is your time. She looked away, her expression filled with conflict. It is the way of my people. The healers said my spirit was already fading. They said nothing more should be done. Daniel leaned closer, his tone gentle but firm. And what do you believe? Do you want to live? Loran's lips trembled. She had never been asked that question. Among her people, the choice was never hers to make. Life and death were decided by the healers, by tradition, not by the wounded. For the first time, she realized the answer inside her heart. Yes, she said softly, I want to live. Then that is enough, Daniel replied. Your choice matters more than theirs. And as long as you want to live, I will fight for you. Her eyes glistened. She did not understand how a human, a soldier of another world, could care more for her life than her own kind. Yet she felt something stir inside her chest. It was not only hope now, it was strength. Small and fragile, but real. The next morning, the conflict grew sharper. Arvin returned with more voices of authority, this time standing before the human commander in the open square of the camp. Many soldiers gathered to watch. You dishonor her by keeping her in pain, Arvin declared. We demand she be given to us. If you refuse, this will be seen as an insult to our traditions. The commander frowned. He did not want war inside the camp, not when the true enemy was already heavy enough. Perhaps we should hand her over, he said, his tone uncertain. This matter brings too much division. Before he could finish, Daniel stepped forward again. His voice rang out over the crowd. No, if you hand her over, you will be killing her with your own hands. She is alive because she chose to fight, and I will not let her be taken. Gasps moved through the soldiers. Some whispered in agreement, others in anger. Arvin glared at him. You would defy not only our laws, but also your own commander? Daniel's fists tightened at his sides. I defy the idea of giving up. You call it law. I call it fear. She deserves better. The commander's jaw clenched. He did not like disobedience, but he also could not ignore the eyes of the camp now fixed on Daniel. Soldiers were listening, truly listening. Some of them carried the memory of times when they themselves had been close to death, saved only because someone refused to give up. Daniel's words stirred something deep inside them. Arvin gave a final warning. If she lives by your hands, then her life will belong to you. Her fate will no longer be counted among us. But remember, soldier, when you defy the natural path, consequences will follow. He turned and left, his robe trailing through the dust. The crowd slowly broke apart, but the tension did not fade. The clash of beliefs had been made clear. That night, Daniel stayed awake by Loran's side once more. She opened her eyes and studied him in silence. Finally, she spoke in a quiet voice. Why do you fight for me, even when it brings you trouble with your own? Daniel thought for a moment, then answered simply, because there's still a chance. And because no one deserves to be left behind. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. It was weak, almost invisible, but it was there, for the first time. She felt that her life was not a burden. It was something worth holding onto, something someone else believed in. Outside the tent, the camp still whispered, and the alien leaders still glared with suspicion. But inside, in the small space where a soldier and a wounded alien shared fragile words, a new bond was forming, a bond built not on orders or traditions, but on the human belief that no life should be abandoned while hope remained. You said. Days turned into a week, and Loran's body slowly began to heal. She was still weak, but her breathing was steadier, her voice clearer, and her eyes brighter. Daniel's simple care had kept her alive, but even he knew it was not enough. Without more help, her recovery might stop halfway. The medics refused to get involved. They said human medicine was too different from alien biology, that any attempt could make things worse. The alien emissaries demanded again and again that she be handed back to them. But Daniel kept refusing. He could not accept their way of giving up. Still, he needed answers. He needed to find a path forward. Late one night, after the camp had gone quiet, Daniel sat by a lantern with a small tablet in his hands. He had borrowed it from the supply room. On the screen were old reports and scattered notes gathered during past encounters with Loran's people. Most of it was confusing, filled with strange symbols and medical terms he did not understand. But Daniel was not one to give up easily. He read carefully, line by line, trying to make sense of the fragments. Liron watched him from her cot. "What are you doing?" she asked softly, her voice still weak, trying to understand. Daniel replied without looking up, "If your healers will not help, then I have to find a way myself. Maybe there's something here, something simple that they missed." She tilted her head slightly. "You think you can do what they could not?" Daniel looked at her then, his eyes steady. "I don't know, but I can try. Sometimes the smallest idea is the one that works. Sometimes what seems simple is exactly what is needed." His words puzzled her. Her people trusted only the advanced tools of their healers. If those tools failed, it meant the end. Yet this human believed in things like cloth, water, and pressure, things anyone could use. It was strange. But she was living proof that his methods were not useless. The next morning, Daniel carried his tablet to the medical tent again. He laid it out on the table and pointed to an image of alien blood cells compared with human ones. The human medic frowned at him. "What are you doing with this? You're no doctor." "I don't need to be a doctor," Daniel said calmly. "I just need to look at what both sides missed." He tapped the screen. "Your reports say the healers use energy fields and regeneration light to close wounds. But they never use something as basic as pressure bandages. Look here there. Blood reacts slower to clotting than ours. That means even small wounds keep bleeding longer. No wonder their healers think injuries like hers are hopeless." The medic raised an eyebrow. "You're saying simple pressure might stop the bleeding?" Daniel nodded. "It already has. That's why she's still alive. I didn't use light or energy. I just wrapped her wound tightly and changed the bandage every day." The medic stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head with a small laugh. "Sometimes I forget. You soldiers think differently. You don't see rules. You see problems and ways to fix them. Maybe that's why she's breathing right now." Word of Daniel's idea spread quickly through the camp. Some laughed, calling it luck. Others grew thoughtful. If something so basic could succeed where alien healers failed, what else had been overlooked? Even a few aliens who had come with Arvin began whispering among themselves, unsettled by the truth. Meanwhile, Daniel worked on new methods. He mixed water with a small amount of salt and gave it to Liron to drink slowly. When she looked at him in confusion, he explained, "Your body is weak because it lost too much. This helps replace it. Simple solution. Not perfect, but it works." Liron sipped the liquid and felt strength return little by little. She looked at him with quiet wonder. Why did no one think of this before? Because they stopped trying, Daniel answered. They trusted only one way. When that way failed, they gave up. But humans, We keep searching. We try again. Even if the answer looks too small to matter. The alien emissary Arvin returned a few days later, expecting to find Lyron fading. Instead, he found her sitting upright, a faint color back in her skin. She was weak, but she was alive in a way no one had believed possible. Arvin's face tightened. This is wrong. She should not still be here. You have forced her body to linger when it was meant to rest. Lyron lifted her head and spoke. Before Daniel could reply, her voice was quiet but firm. No, I chose to stay, and he gave me the chance. You left me when I still breathed. He did not. That is the difference. The emissary looked shaken. Her words cut deep, not only into him but into the others who stood nearby. For the first time, one of their own had spoken against tradition, openly rejecting the belief that giving up was honorable. Daniel placed a steady hand on the cot beside her. You see, it wasn't impossible. It just needed a new idea. The camp grew restless after that. Some humans began to support Daniel openly, praising his determination. Some aliens grew angry, calling it an insult to their culture. Others, however, grew curious, asking quiet questions about what he had done. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon with red light, a small group of younger aliens came to Daniel in secret. They looked nervous but determined. One of them spoke. We heard what you did. Some of our families suffer from wounds the healers cannot cure. Can you show us? Daniel looked at them carefully, then nodded. It's simple. I can show you, but understand this: what matters is not the bandages, not the water, not the salt. What matters is refusing to give up. As long as someone breathes, there's a chance. The aliens listened with wide eyes. For them, it was a lesson both strange and powerful. That night, Lyron rested quietly, her body stronger than it had been since the battle. She turned her head toward Daniel and whispered, They fear you? Daniel smiled faintly. They don't fear me. They fear the idea. Once you prove that hope works, it spreads. And nothing can stop it. For the first time in her life, Lyron felt a truth deeper than tradition. She was alive not because of the power of her people's healers, but because a human soldier refused to let her go. It was an idea that changed everything. The outpost grew restless with each passing day. Lyran's slow recovery was no longer a hidden matter whispered among soldiers. It had become the subject of debate, anger, and hope. Daniel's simple methods had worked, but instead of peace, they brought division among the humans. Some praised him. They saw in him the spirit of never giving up, the same drive that had carried their kind across worlds. But others feared his actions. They argued that helping an alien went against orders and could spark mistrust with their allies or commanders. Among the aliens, the split was sharper. A number of younger ones came quietly to learn from Daniel, curious about his strange yet effective ideas. But the elders grew louder in their opposition. They said he was breaking the sacred order. They said life forced to continue against fate was not life but dishonor. And in their eyes, Lyron herself had become a symbol of rebellion. One night, a meeting was called inside the central hall of the outpost. Soldiers gathered along with the alien emissaries. The air was heavy with tension, and the lanterns flickered as if afraid of the argument about to unfold. Arvin stood tall among his people, his robe gleaming faintly in the dim light. His voice carried authority as he spoke. This human has taken one of ours and defied the order of life. What you see as healing, we see as an insult to the natural path. If she lives by his hand, she will live outside our honor. We demand this ends tonight. Daniel rose from his place near the back. His jaw was tight, his eyes steady. You demand her death because you are afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of hope. You call it law, but it is fear dressed as tradition. Gasps filled the hall. Some humans nodded quietly, others frowned in worry. The aliens murmured among themselves, some agreeing with Arvin, others uncertain. Lyron, still weak but stronger than before, insisted on being present. She leaned on a wooden staff for support as she stepped into the hall. Her presence drew silence. No one expected her to stand on her own. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the firelight, her eyes sharp with determination. I was left to die. She said, her voice thin but firm. I begged in my heart for help, but none came. My healers turned away. My people said it was my time. But this human did not accept that. He gave me water when my throat burned. He pressed my wounds when they bled. He kept me warm when my body turned cold. Because of him, I still breathe. Her words carried across the hall, striking deeper than any argument. Even Arvin's face faltered for a moment. But he recovered quickly. You are confused by pain. You do not see that you walk outside our laws now. What you call mercy is only delaying what must come. No, Liron answered sharply. What I call mercy is life. If death had taken me, I would not be standing here. You say I should have gone quietly. But I say this, there is nothing quiet in the desire to live. That desire is stronger than law. The hall broke into a storm of voices. Humans argued with aliens, some in support, some in anger. The commander of the outpost tried to restore order, but the division had already spread. Later that night, Daniel and Liron sat near the edge of the camp, away from the noise. She leaned against a crate, her staff resting by her side. The stars stretched wide above them, silent witnesses to the storm below. They will not forgive this. Liron said quietly. Daniel stared at the sky. Then let them be angry. You're alive. That matters more. She turned to him. You risk everything for me. Your command, your standing, even your safety. Why? Daniel looked at her, his voice steady. Because if I gave you up, I'd be betraying everything I believe in. Humans fight because every life matters. Yours matters. Even if no one else believes it. Her chest tightened, not with pain, but with a feeling she could not name. She had been ready to die, yet here she was, alive because of him. It was more than survival now. It was a challenge to everything she had been taught. But shadows of resistance grew stronger. That same night, a group of alien elders gathered in secret near the edge of the camp. Their faces were grim, their voices low. She must not be allowed to continue, one whispered. If she lives, others will question us. They will break from the path. Another nodded. The human must be stopped. His ideas spread like fire. Already some of our young speak of trying his ways. If this continues, our order will collapse. They agreed to act. If words could not end this, then force would. The next evening, Daniel returned to the tent to find Liron sitting up, trying to adjust her bandages. She smiled faintly when she saw him. Your ideas are strange, she said. But they work. Daniel chuckled softly. Strange is another word for different. Sometimes different is what saves us. Their quiet moment was broken when a soldier rushed in, his face pale. Daniel. The elders are gathering outside the gates. They're demanding her life again. And they're not alone this time. Daniel's heart tightened. He stood and looked at Liron. They won't stop. They're afraid of what you represent. She gripped her staff and stood slowly. Her legs trembled, but Herwell held her up. Then let them see. If they want me gone, they must look at me and hear my voice. I will not hide. Daniel's eyes softened with respect. You're stronger than you think. Together, they walked out into the night, toward the growing crowd of angry voices. The shadows of resistance had grown into something larger, but Daniel knew this was not the end. It was only the next step in the battle of ideas, and he would not face it alone. The night air was cold as Daniel and Liron stepped toward the gates of the outpost. Torches burned and rose, lighting up the faces of the alien elders who had gathered with their followers. Their sharp eyes glowed in the firelight, and their voices rose in angry chants. Behind Daniel, several human soldiers stood uncertain, some gripping their rifles tightly, others looking uneasy. They were not sure if this was a matter of war or simply a conflict of belief. The commander of the outpost stood on the wall above, his arms folded as he watched events unfold. Liron leaned on her staff, her body weak but her spirit unshaken. She raised her head high and walked forward, step by step. The crowd grew silent as they saw her, alive and standing when many had said she should have been gone. Arvin, the elder leader, stepped forward with his robes trailing in the dust. His voice carried sharpness like a blade. You defy us with every breath. You should not be here. You should have accepted the path given to you. Instead, you let this human twist nature with his crude methods. Liran's voice rose, steady though her chest heaved from effort. I am alive, Arvin. Look at me. The laws you hold to would have let me die, but I stand here now because I was given a chance to live. If life is dishonor, then let me carry it proudly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of the younger aliens looked at her with wide eyes, while others looked down, unsure if they should agree or remain silent. Daniel stepped up beside her. His voice was calm but firm. This is not about breaking your law. This is about seeing that life is not something to throw away. You call my methods crude, but they work. What good is a law that lets someone suffer when help is possible? Arvin's eyes narrowed. Your arrogance blinds you. Human, you act as though your ways are superior, but our people have survived for centuries by following the order. If one falls, another rises. We do not cling to the weak. Daniel did not back down. Then you've forgotten something. The weak often become the strongest when given time. A single life can change everything, and she is proof of it. The silence that followed was heavy. Liran's hand trembled on her staff, but she lifted it and struck the ground once. The sound echoed through the night. I am not weak. I was left to die, yet I stand here because of one who refused to give up. You may say I am outside your law, but I will not accept death simply because tradition demands it. If that makes me an outcast, then so be it. The younger aliens in the crowd began whispering louder now, some nodding to one another. The elders sensed the shift and grew uneasy. Arvin raised his hand to silence them. His voice deepened. Then, we will take you back by force. If you live by this human's hand, you live against our order. You must not remain. At his signal, several alien guards stepped forward. Their weapons glinted in the torchlight. Daniel instinctively moved in front of Liran, his fists tightening though he carried no weapon in his hand. Step aside. One of the guards said coldly. No. Daniel answered. His tone was quiet but unbreakable. If you want her, you go through me. The guards hesitated. They had not expected a human to stand so openly against them. The soldiers on the wall above shifted nervously, waiting for the commander's order. Then, before anyone could move further, Liran spoke again. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade through silence. If you take me, you do not just take a body, you take away hope from every voice that whispers in doubt. You fear me not because I am weak, but because I show there is another way. Her words struck deeper than any weapon. Some of the younger aliens lowered their weapons. Uncertain now, a soldier among the humans whispered, She's right. She's turning them. Arvin saw the hesitation spreading and his anger grew. His voice thundered. This is poison. If we allow this, our ways will crumble. She will infect our young with doubt, and soon there will be no law left. Stop her now. But even as he shouted, one of the younger aliens stepped forward, placing his weapon on the ground. His voice was strong. If this is poison, then I accept it. She lives, and I see strength in her life. I will not strike her down. Gasps filled the air. Another followed, lowering her weapon as well. Soon a small group stood behind Liran, defying the elders for the first time. Arvin's face twisted in fury. He looked at Daniel with venom. This is your doing. You bring division and ruin. You will answer for this. Daniel did not flinch. I brought life. If that brings ruin to your law, maybe your law was already broken. The standoff stretched long, every torch flicker adding weight to the moment. The commander of the outpost finally stepped forward on the wall above. His voice boomed across the gathering. Enough. No blood will be spilled here tonight. The human acted on his duty to save life. The alien stands by her right to live. This matter will be carried to higher council, not settled in violence. The elders hissed among themselves, but they could not defy the commander's authority without sparking open conflict. With the humans, slowly, they retreated, their faces carved with bitterness. Liran's legs weakened, and she leaned heavily on her staff. Daniel caught her arm to steady her. She looked at him with weary but burning eyes. They will not stop. They will find another way to end this. Daniel nodded. Then we'll be ready. You're not alone in this fight anymore. Behind them, The younger aliens who had stepped forward now stood firm, their eyes filled with determination. They had chosen to break from the old order, and in doing so, a new spark had been lit. The night ended without blood, but the struggle had only begun. Shadows of resistance had turned into open defiance, and Daniel knew that what came next would decide more than just Loran's fate. It would decide the balance between old laws and new hope. The night after the confrontation at the gates was long and restless. Daniel sat near the fire in the human outpost, his hands clasped together, his mind racing. He knew the conflict with the alien elders was far from over. Saving Lyron had started something far greater than either of them expected. It was no longer only about her survival. It was about the future of her people. Lyron rested nearby, her body weak but her spirit strong. The glow of the firelight touched her face, showing the sharp lines of determination in her expression. She spoke softly, though her words carried weight. They will return. They will not let this go. You saw the fear in their eyes. It was not fear of me dying. It was fear of me living. Daniel nodded. This saw what you represent, change. They don't want change because it threatens the power they've held for so long. One of the younger aliens who had stood by Lyron stepped closer. His name was Terran, a strong but quiet figure who now carried himself with new courage. Many of us do not agree with the elders. We were told that following the law kept balance. But after seeing you alive, I can no longer believe that letting someone die is true balance. Others who had gathered nodded in agreement. There were more than Daniel had expected. Some were young, but a few were older, their faces lined with years of service, now filled with doubt about the traditions they had once obeyed. Lyron pushed herself to sit straighter. She looked at them, her voice growing stronger. If you believe this, then you must be ready. The elders will not allow us to speak freely. They will try to silence us before more of you begin to see the truth. We must show that life is not weakness. We must prove that hope is stronger than fear. The humans in the outpost listened carefully. Many had not understood the depth of the aliens' laws before. Now they saw a division forming that could shake the alliance between humans and Loran's people. Daniel felt the weight pressing heavier on his shoulders. He had only wanted to save her life, but now he had become a symbol in a fight that could grow into something much larger. The following morning, the sound of horns echoed across the valley. The alien elders had returned, this time with a larger force. Warriors marched in disciplined lines, their armor shining under the pale sun. The humans at the outpost tightened their defenses, while those who supported Lyron stood anxiously. Near her, Arvin stepped forward once more, his voice sharp and commanding. Lyron, your survival is a stain on our people. You bring division where there should be unity. You must come with us now, or we will take you by force. Lyron leaned on her staff and stepped out beyond the gates. Her voice rose in reply. Strong despite her frail frame, you call unity the act of silence. You call strength the act of turning away from life. But unity built on fear is not unity at all. It is chains. I will not walk back into chains. The crowd behind Arvin shifted. Uneasily, many of the younger warriors looked uncertain again, their eyes flicking between their elder and the woman who had defied death. Daniel stepped beside her, his hand resting on the grip of his rifle, though he did not raise it. She is not alone anymore. If you try to take her, you'll have to fight us all. Arvin's eyes burned with fury. You would risk war for this one life? Daniel's answer was firm. For this life, yes, because it stands for more than one. It stands for every life you would throw away without care. If war comes from that, then it is not us who started it, it is you. The silence that followed was heavy. Both sides waited, tension thick as stone. Then, before the first move could be made, another voice rose. It was one of the elders, but not Arvin. Her name was Selara, her voice softer yet filled with wisdom. Perhaps we must ask ourselves what we fear most. Do we fear death, or do we fear change? This girl lives, and in her life, I see no weakness. I see courage. Gasps spread through the alien ranks. An elder speaking against Arvin was unheard of. Arvin turned on her, his voice filled with rage. You betray the law. You betray everything we have stood for. Solara met his anger with calm. No, I honor what we have stood for, but I see that our law has become a wall instead of a path. A law that cannot bend will break. She is proof of that. The younger warriors, hearing the words of an elder, began lowering their weapons. One by one, they stepped back, refusing to advance. The tide was shifting before everyone's eyes. Arvin shouted, desperate to regain control. Do not listen to her. Do not listen to them. This is corruption. This is weakness. But his voice no longer carried the same power. Doubt had already spread, and the more he shouted, the more he seemed afraid rather than strong. Liron raised her staff again, her voice ringing clear. I was left to die, but I lived. And because I lived, others now see that another way is possible. You can call me weak, but strength is not in dying for nothing. Strength is in standing for life. Her words were like fire in dry grass. The crowd erupted. Voices rising in support. Many warriors dropped their weapons entirely. Stepping over to Loran's side, the humans in the outpost raised their banners, showing they too stood with her. Arvin, seeing the shift, gave one last furious cry and stormed away with a handful of loyal followers. His defeat was not by blade or blood, but by voices and courage. As the sun climbed higher, peace returned to the valley. Liron, though weak in body, stood tall in spirit. She looked at Daniel with gratitude and resolve. It was your idea, your refusal to let me go, that brought us here. You gave me more than life. You gave me a chance to change everything. Daniel shook his head with a small smile. You were the one who stood against them. I only gave you the chance. The rest was you. The younger aliens and even some elders now gathered around Liron, pledging to follow her example. A new movement was born, not through force, but through survival and hope. That evening, as the sun set in colors of red and gold, Daniel stood on the wall of the outpost, watching the horizon. He knew the struggle was not over. Arvin and those like him would not vanish quietly, but something had changed forever. A seed of hope had been planted, and no law, no fear, could erase it. Liron joined him, leaning slightly on her staff but with strength in her eyes. This is not the end. It is only the beginning. Daniel nodded. Then we'll face it together. And so as the night returned, they stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future would bring. A human's idea had saved one life, but now it was shaping the destiny of an entire people.